Welcome to the podcast, Restore Yourself, Restore Your Marriage, where it's all about discovering the thoughts that get you in the mood, the thoughts that get you out of the mood, and how creating a deeper connection with yourself creates a deeper connection with your spouse. I'm your coach, Shelly Anderson, coaching you through life, love, and intimacy. This is episode number 165. Catching vibes and catching sexiness. Ooh, yes. Okay, I wanted to start off today's episode by sharing a quick story. So this happened between Nick and I just a few days ago, and it was pretty awesome. So I wanted to do a podcast on this. So we have 3 children right now who are all running with some hormones going through their bodies. And I think they all kind of caught the same vibe. And I think this was kind of like a complaining vibe. Like, let's complain about things that are not going the way we want or things that are bugging us or whatever it was. They all seemed to catch the same vibe. And I was standing in the kitchen and they were in the living room and they all just started kind of unloading this vibe. And so I remember it kind of catching me off guard. And while none of my kids were looking at me, I looked over at Nick and just kind of gave him this look as if to kind of mock them just a little bit, like, oh my gosh, this parenting thing. What is happening right now? And it's a small thing. It's a small thing that took place, but it was awesome. So I kind of gave Nick this little look, this little kind of mocking gesture of complaining, and maybe even rolled my eyes a little bit. And Nick totally caught my vibe. In fact, he caught it so much that he just stood up from across the room, walked over to me, and just looked at me, held me, and just started laughing at what I had just done. And that may seem like it's not a big deal. And it's such a little thing. But what ended up happening the rest of the day is that we would continue to look back at each other, and not necessarily in reference to all the complaining that was going on, but just to look back and say, hey, I caught your vibe. I see you. I'm checking in with you. And we would look back at each other throughout the rest of the entire day, even into the evening. And we would just look. We would catch each other. And I loved it because it kind of added this significance. And I gave it the significance of like, hey, we're in this thing together. We're in this parenting thing together. It's not always easy. It's not always fun. We don't always see eye to eye. But hey, we're in it together and we're working through it. So what ended up happening was that this little gesture, this catching the vibe, ended up leading to catching some sexiness, right? Because we had that emotional connection throughout the rest of the day. Now, we were super busy the rest of the day. We had things to do. We had appointments to be at. The kids had things to do. I had to get, help some neighbors and friends with certain things. So it's not like we just sat there and stared at each other all day. But being able to have that little connection throughout the day was awesome. And it led to some very sexy times that night that were easy to go into. It wasn't challenging. It wasn't me trying to say, hey, let's get busy because it's been a couple days, or it's my duty, or I'm trying to be a good wife. It was none of those things. It was very easy. And my desire was there to be intimate because we were able to catch each other's vibes. So I just wanted to talk about that, how something so small and so little can really make a big difference, right? I love the scripture, by small and simple things we can accomplish great and amazing things. And this can even be true with the intimate relationship we have with our spouse. It doesn't always need to be these huge changes and these dramatic gestures. Catching our spouse's vibe is so small. It doesn't take a lot. and yet the impact can be large. So sometimes when I work with couples, I find that there is an overall sense of like, well, when we're thinking about sexiness, like maybe I'm just not like that. I'm just not sexy. Or maybe a husband is thinking that about his wife. Maybe he thought in the beginning when they were dating that she was super sexy and attractive. But now that they're in the thick of things with kids and work and busyness and all the activities, maybe it seems like there's not as much sexiness there. So I think that this is a thought that comes up quite a bit for women about themselves, that they're just not like that. And a thought that comes up for husbands, like my wife used to be sexy, but maybe she's not so much that way anymore. So what do we do about this? Well, sexiness is a state of mind. It's not like some people are just born sexy and there's nothing anyone can do about it if you're not born that way, right? Sexiness is a state of mind. And so when we think about sexiness and how we want to embody sexiness, that's something that we are totally able and capable of doing. Now, I wanted to just define the word catching for a minute because we're talking about catching vibes. So what exactly does that mean? When we're catching something, it means that we may discover something unexpectedly. And I love this because this can add to the element of fun and surprise in the relationship if we're spending our time actually looking for it and focusing on it, right? The fact that Nick was able to look and pay attention to my reaction at that moment, he could have just as easily been paying attention to something else and had zero interest. But he had interest, and women can do the same thing. We can have interest in our husbands and the things that they're doing and how they're reacting to things. Catching can mean to check oneself. We can check on ourselves suddenly or momentarily, right? Like, so I knew at that moment when my kids were all complaining that I could go 1,000 different ways with that. I could react 1,000 different ways. And I chose to react within myself in a way that was funny, right? I wanted to handle that in a way that was funny so that I wouldn't get stressed or bugged, or I didn't want to react in a negative way towards my kids. And so being able to check in with yourself is an awesome way to just catch your own vibes and see what you're going to do with them, to have that awareness of how you want to respond. Catching means to become suddenly aware of something. And I love this because it challenges us to increase self-awareness, to take it to a higher level, to check in with ourselves in any given moment and say, how am I feeling about this? And depending on how you're feeling, you can trace it back to the thoughts that you're having. And so it allows us to develop skills that are super valuable for relationships. Catching means to obtain something through effort. And I love this because even though my husband caught my vibe, it's not like it took him a ton of effort. On a scale of 1 to 10, maybe that was like a 1 or a 2. It's not like he was changing everything about his personality to catch my vibe. And my vibe wasn't even about sexiness, right? It was something that could have really bugged me or annoyed me, and I turned it into something funny for just a second or two. But his effort was there. And I'm sure from a husband's point of view, that's not a big level of effort to just catch my vibe. And so it's a great way to consider spicing things up with little effort. That's great. We want to look for opportunities like that. And this is one of them. Catching something means to take in and retain. And I think that's really what showed my husband's effort level, right? He caught my vibe and he's like, oh, I'm going to go connect with my wife. I'm going to walk over to her and we're going to laugh about this together. It was awesome. And then we were able to retain that vibe throughout the day, even with all the things that we had going on. Catching means to attract something and hold on to it. I love this, right? Because this is where A little bit of the sexiness can come into it. We can attract our spouse. We can attract them and draw them into us. And at the same time, we can be drawn and attracted to our spouse when we're looking for opportunities for that to take place. And if we continue to look for those opportunities, we can hold on to them. That can last throughout the day, even with the ups and downs. And finally, to catch means to grasp by the senses or the mind. And of course, I love this definition because it talks about the power of what our mind can do. It's only human and very natural to look at our spouse's weaknesses or their faults or all the ways that they're very inhuman. Or I shouldn't say inhuman, I should say very human, right? And it's easy to look at those things and be critical of those things and let them bug us and annoy us and keep us from the sexiness. But when we are able to increase our self-awareness, we're using our mind to do something that's better, to do something that is more effective and more beneficial, not only to ourselves, but for our spouse and for the relationship. So this is going to have positive effects on how we feel. Now, what is a vibe? I'm sure we all know what a vibe is, right? A lot of times we can think about a vibe when it comes to putting some music on. And we can say that certain songs have a vibe. I know that I have certain bands that I love to listen to when I want to decompress and lower my stress. And I have other songs that I want to listen to when I want to get into a sexy mindset. Those are two very different vibes. The other day, I had a song running through my head. It was the all too famous song from Justin Timberlake from back in the day. I'm Bringing Sexy Back. And this song was running through my mind. I'm like, yes, I love this song. It's so good. And it got me in the mood. It got me pumped up and it was amazing. So I think we all can have an understanding of what it means to catch a vibe, a feeling. But a vibe can be defined as a person's emotional state as communicated to and felt by others. I love this because there's a form of communication that's taking place here. Just like when I made that funny look towards Nick about our kids complaining, I was communicating to him, even though I wasn't saying anything verbally at the time. My actions and my body language were definitely communicating. A vibe is to enjoy, to dance to, or feel inspired by. I love this. We can be inspired by paying attention to our spouse. We can be inspired by them and what they're going through and their vibes, right? And it doesn't have to be a negative thing. It can be a positive thing if we are looking at it through the right lens. And a vibe is to transmit or to give out a feeling. And so as we pay attention to the things that our spouse is doing and looking at them through a lens of, hey, I want to catch a good vibe. I want to look for those moments where we can connect. That's awesome. Because I think if we spend more of our time doing that, we're going to find more opportunities instead of our focus being on the negative. Now, I especially love the vibe and the feeling of sexiness. It is an invigorating feeling. And sometimes when I talk about this in workshops or with clients, they're like, yes, I want that. I want to feel sexy. And so this is something that's like attractive or interesting. And so it's important for each person, each spouse to know what is attractive and interesting for them personally, because if they are able to incorporate more of those things into their life by choice, and they choose to put more of that stuff into their lives on purpose, they're going to feel more of the sexiness. This is very empowering because we don't have to wait around for our spouse to do something specific. We can put it in our own lives and then also be observant for opportunities. Sexiness is something suggestive or stimulating. So I like that in these definitions, sexiness is not only related to sex, right? It's one of the definitions, but it's not the only one. And so anything that our spouse does that is attractive or interesting can really contribute to this vibe of sexiness. So just like that funny look I gave my husband, he probably thought that was interesting because I don't normally do that. So it became interesting to him and then attractive to him, which is why he came over and we were able to connect. So how we view things, what our focus is on, is going to make a big difference. And so we really are able to move away from the idea of sexiness is only based in things related to sex. No, that's just part of it, but is not the only part. So look for things. Look for things that are interesting to you about your spouse, things you didn't notice before. One time I remember paying attention to my husband's bedtime routine. I was like, I wonder if I've paid attention to this before. What does he do? What are the steps? Do I know them? Could I list them in order? And I just observed it was one of the most interesting things I've ever done. It was just the best experiment because I discovered things about him that I didn't realize I didn't even know. And it was so fun and just a great experiment. And we totally bonded over it. And we still talk about the fun insights we had as I did that and as I shared them with Nick. So what do we do with all this information? Well, I want us to become a little bit more observant and to view things with a lens of that's interesting, that is intriguing. This fascinates me, right? Those senses of wonder and curiosity and fascination, those are really great to be able to catch the vibe of sexiness. And if you are thinking, well, I may be able to do that, but I don't know if my spouse is going to be able to do that. Give them the example of how to do it by showing them. So practice catching their vibe. Do that and then show them what's possible. When we're able to do that, we show our spouse how to do that. And so we don't have to control them or force them or wish they were doing things differently. We can give them that example of how something like that can be done. This is fabulous. When your spouse feels you do it, they're going to be like, ooh, that was kind of fun. It's going to give them that interest of what that was and maybe to find out more about it and have a desire for themselves that feels very natural to seek that out and experience it themselves. So when that type of situation is able to take place more organically, the results are usually better than if we're trying to force our spouse to do that. So give them that example. Catch your spouse's vibe and join them. This is sexy. This is total sexiness without a ton of effort. So this next week, I want you to see if you can pay attention to this, if you can focus in on your spouse and see if you can catch their vibe, catch their sexiness, turn it into something awesome. Make it a memorable experience, even if it's something that only lasts a few seconds long, because it feels amazing when you're able to feel the sexiness. Now, just like I talked about Justin Timberlake and his song, Bringing Sexy Back. When this song was stuck in my mind, I remember thinking, hey, that's what I do. As a coach, this is exactly what I do. I bring the sexiness back into other people's marriages, right? I teach them how to do that. And so I just wanted to remind everyone that I have a free webinar coming out at the end of this month, September 29th at 11 o'clock a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And it's free. So make sure you sign up. Go to my website, shelly.andersoncoaching.com. It's right up at the very top of the website. Just click and register so your spot can be saved. It's going to be awesome. We are going to talk about the sexiness, some things that really contribute to sexual frustration, and how to have better sex, especially emotionally. So sign up for it. Don't miss out. It's going to be amazing. And I look forward to seeing all of you there. But for this week, remember, the more you restore this type of intimacy with yourself, the more you restore it with your spouse. Thank you so much for listening today, and I hope you will join me again next week.